Now I would like to ask about a little bit about chapter 9. It's titled Inter-Community Relations in India. This is a fascinating topic, and I believe our viewers and listeners would like to hear your views on it in chapter 9, Inter-Community Relations in India.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tajinder. Yeah, this is a very important issue, and this actually lays bare some of the key characteristics of India, not just as a country but as a civilization. Now, India, as we know, is we talk a lot about unity in diversity, but India is the most striking example of unity in diversity. Okay, so there are so many different ethnicities in India, and yet they have lived in peace for thousands of years. Okay, now if you look at foreign influences, the Greeks came to India in a few hundred years before Christ, and then the Muslims came, but prior to the Muslims coming to India, the Christians came to India. Okay, so it is well-known proof that Christianity came to India before it went to Europe, and particularly in the south. So they have lived in India. The Jews have migrated to India, and until recently they lived in India in peace and contributed a lot to Indian society. They have now moved. Some of them have now moved to Israel, because Israel is a pure Jewish country, or at least is a Jewish country in name. So, and then the Parsis have come to India and stayed in India for continuously, as they were persecuted in other parts of the world. So, when you talk about people being persecuted in other parts of the world and fleeing to other countries and being offered safe homes and safe occupations, India is, I think, one of the greatest examples of that. So India can be justly be proud of its heritage of enabling people of different ethnicities to live in peace, and although there have been some issues, but in the past, but more largely they have lived in peace. But considering that the history of India is 7,000 years old, these small problems are minor instances in the historical span of 7,000 years. So I think one of the reasons why this has happened is that Hinduism has the core religion of India, or the ancient name for it, which is Sanatana Dharma, has this immense value of being able to assimilate groups within it instead of denying them their existence. So the Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who was the second president of India, I'll quote a sentence from one of his very famous books. The book is called The Hindu View of Life, which was written early in the 20th century. Radhakrishnan just noted, Hinduism developed an attitude of comprehensive charity instead of a fanatic faith in an inflexible creed. It didn't say that this is I'm right and you are wrong. It said try to accommodate every group, and that is why Hinduism was able to sustain and carry on even under foreign invasion. So many groups invaded India for thousands of years, and yet India, the main cultural backbone of India, remained intact. Now, and the new religious persuasions that came up in India also had very great similarity with Hinduism. For example, if you look at Jainism and Buddhism and Sikhism and so on, which we call Indian religions together with Sanatana Dharma, all born in India, they also have a lot of characteristics in common with Hinduism. For example, if you look at the Jain religion, then they have 24 Tirthankars. The 24th Tirthankar was Lord Mahavir, whom Jains worship. But the first Tirthankar was Lord Rishabh, and Rishabh is known as an incarnation of Vishnu in Hinduism. So there are very common threads running through that. So they don't have any great mutual conflict. It is not violent conflict for any significant amount of time. But then the invasions by other groups, for example, Muslims and Christians, they came with a completely different set of precepts about what life is. But Indians were able to accommodate them as well, and Muslims and Christians live in India in comparative peace. So one important characteristic of Hindu society or Indian society is the Varna system. It's wrongly called the caste system. There is no such thing as a caste system in India. Because the Varna system, which is 4 Varnas or maybe 5 if you include the tribal groups within it. So and then within the Varna system there is a huge number of jatis, which is for Varna and Jati, that's the nomenclature of Indian society. And it is so pervasive that this Varna system is now prevalent even in Muslims and Christians in India to some extent. It has been there for so long. Now, one important point to note about the Varna system in India is that it is completely misunderstood at the moment. The ancient form of the Varna system was not by birth. The person's Varna was not determined. A person didn't become a Brahmin just because he was born out of Brahmin parents. Certainly not. The concept of Varna is very complex, and it is basically saying that it depends on what your attitudes are, what your inclinations are, and what you have inherited from your past lives and so on. It does not depend upon your birth at all. It has been repeated over and over and over again. For example, I will give you, and so-called lower Varna people were not barred from doing great religious work. They were in fact encouraged. For example, I'll give you just one example. Several examples are cited in the book. I'll give you just one example. The Bhagavad Gita, which is the most holy book of the Hindus. Any Hindu would swear by the Bhagavad Gita as its core, as incorporating the core values of Hinduism. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, if you think about it, the Bhagavad Gita was recited was a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but it was narrated by whom? It was narrated by Sanjay, who was a charioteer of Dhritarashtra. So charioteer is a so-called low caste. So he recited, we know the Bhagavad Gita through Sanjay, not from, we weren't there at the battlefield of Mahabharata to listen to the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Sanjay narrated it for us, and Sanjay was a low caste person, so-called low caste person. So in Hinduism, the person passing on the message of God is called a guru. So by that token, Sanjay is the guru of all who believe in the Bhagavad Gita. So how can we say that low caste people or people from so-called low Varna are not entitled to the highest philosophical thinking? Nothing like that is true. And this is what people don't understand, and they get these caste animosities unnecessarily in India. So I have dwelt a lot on that because this needs to be dispelled, and this is a book about society as much as it is about economy. So I have dwelt on that. I have talked about the fact that the Mahabharata, one of the greatest epics in Hindu thought, is basically composed by so-called low Varna people, and not the original was done through by Ved Vyas, but ultimately when it was written in its modern form, it came from different sources. Similarly, in the Vedas, there are many instances of such things. So I try to dispel that notion that somehow caste has anything to do with birth. No, nothing at all. Any person can be of any caste, depending upon what their past accumulated traits are, what their past accumulated inclinations are, and so on. So these I've tried to dispel. And then what I have done is to look at the economic attainments of the various groups in Indian society, how they have fared in terms of average incomes, how they have fared in terms of poverty and so on.
Mm.
So I find that there is not much difference between the economic attainments, even in modern India. There's not much difference on average among people from different ethnic groups in India. Okay,
Mm.
so in terms of incomes, there is some dispersion, but not a lot. The Sikhs and the Christians are the most well-off groups in India in terms of income, average income, and then come the upper caste, so-called upper caste Hindus, and then come the other backward class Hindus, then come the other upper caste Muslims, other backward caste Muslims, and then the so-called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. In terms of poverty, again, there is not much dispersion,
Mm.
but the least well-off people in the rural areas are the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and the least well-off groups in the urban areas are Muslims.
Mm.
So this is what is discussed in the book using actual data from economic surveys and my own work. So basically, I say that the construction of society or the conception of society according to so-called caste is inherently mistaken, and nevertheless India's there's not much disparity between them in terms of poverty or incomes, but it is inherently irrelevant. And a lot of the conflicts, if will go away from society, if they go back and read the scriptures and say what the Varna was actually about. So this is a manufacture of some people who wanted to divide society. So India is not a divided society, it is a very unified society.
Mm.
And this is a way of dividing society which has unfortunately been carried out for many hundreds of years.
Mm.
So these are some of the conclusions I come to from this chapter.
All right.